frankly, I'm a little alarmed by the formation of a committee. As a country, we love forming committees for every single thing. If there's a problem, the best way to kick a problem down the road is to say committee bana denge. I'm sure I'll get a lot of blowback from people in the MOD or the Air Force saying, you're a civilian, you don't have these pressures on your head. A committee has this benefit. It provides clarity, it gives you an action plan, in black and white tells you what you can and cannot do. It generates a priority list. My answer to that again would be, sure, I'm a civilian and I certainly don't have those pressures, but as a taxpayer, I think it is yours and my, Dev, our right to ask, in the absence of this committee, are you honestly telling me that the Ministry of Defence and the Air Force did not have a handle on these priorities? When you suddenly signal that this requires an exclusive committee, the signal I'm getting is, shit, the problem is worse than I thought it was.
Yes, actually.
MOD knows what the shortfalls are. Air Force knows what the MOD can and cannot provide. Files are constantly moving between MOD and Air Force headquarters, which are literally about 800 meters apart. South Block and Vayu Bhavan are 800 meters apart. How difficult can it be for files to move between the two? There is no question of people not being, in the picture of what these are. So what is this committee? It's almost like I'm a little bewildered. Am I missing something? There were 5 aircraft, if I'm not mistaken. 5 aircraft which India could have said, yes, we want these aircraft because these aircraft are valuable to us. Delay. Finally, India was able to order 1 because the rest was scooped up by Qatar and some other countries because India didn't react fast enough. And it's a decision that is still being regretted because a country of India's size, most definitely for an aircraft of that kind, should have been able to operate at least 20 of those aircraft, and we're stuck with 11 now.
Hello and welcome. This is the 51st episode of In Our Defense and it's the last week of the year. Hi Shiv, how are you?
Hi Dev, all good. We missed a week last week because of my travels. I was away in the Andamans, and I'm very happy to note that our listeners have been tracking my movements very closely. I've been getting comments through the entire time that I was there saying that, if you're there, why can't you still do an episode of In Our Defense? So thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for suggesting that. We would have if I could, but the thing is there was just too much going on. I was there for the for the 20th anniversary event of the tsunami. Yes. Today, in fact, happens to be the 20th anniversary. On this day, 20 years ago, is when the biggest natural disaster to hit the Indian Ocean happened. I was a young reporter. I was 24 years old at that time, and that was my first big outstation coverage. So I was on the islands at the end of December to cover the aftermath of the tsunami, and so 20 years later, I was invited back to visit Kargil, the island, where a lot of military personnel perished along with their families. The Air Force station there. A very, very, very illuminating experience. Also very heartbreaking because the scars of what happened 20 years ago are of course still there. But I think it was also an event where the Indian military came into its own in terms of humanitarian relief. It was a disaster of truly epic catastrophic proportions. Mass damage, huge casualties, enormous displacement of a kind never even planned for before. And I think it was a kind of landmark moment for the Indian military. There's a pre-tsunami Indian military and there's a post-tsunami Indian military. And I think I've been very privileged to see them both. So going back after 20 years was that's what my week was about.
Yeah. Can imagine. I was barely into my teens back then, so I don't really have very strong memories from back then. But I remember those headlines, those photos especially, that really showed that devastation that happened. And you're right, by the way, about our fans. In fact, I happened to meet one of our fans the other night when I was out for dinner somewhere, and just I was exiting the restaurant, he just walked up to me and said, "Hey, I'm a big fan of your podcast, and you guys should just keep doing what you guys are doing, and convey this to Shiv as well." And I said, "I will do." His name is Vishnu, so a shout out to him.
That's great. That's great.
So Vishnu, thanks, and keep listening to us. And like I told you the other night, whenever you have comments for us, please do leave us whatever you want us to talk about. So what will we talk about this week? We'll talk about the Indian Air Force. Why? Because of a report in Times of India by Rajat Pandit, where he reported that a committee is going to be set up, headed by the Defense Secretary. There'll be the DRDO chief on it. I'm guessing the Deputy Chief of the Air Force. No mention of the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. Very interesting to note for me, at least. And this committee will kind of do what we are about to do on this episode, mota look at what's kind of imperiling the air force, especially with terms of shortages of equipment. When we say equipment, mostly fighter jets. There's also the non-fighter fleet. We'll spend a bit on this episode on that as well, but a bit later we'll focus on the crux of the problem, which is the fighter jet shortage. On this podcast, we've talked about Tejas, we've talked about MRFA, we've talked about AMCA in bits and pieces. But this episode, I think, will kind of give us an opportunity to sort of merge all of this together and talk about that singular issue that is plaguing the Air Force, the lack of fighter jets. We've done this before, but let's do the bean count once again, so our listeners and viewers have some context before I'll let you expand on this need for this committee in the first place. Right now, you're at around 30 odd squadrons. For around 40% of that are Sukhois. Rest are your Jaguars, your Mirages, your MiG-29s, MiG-21s, the Rafales, and the Tejases, the Tejas Mark 1. What's in the pipeline? The Tejas Mark 1A, which has been delayed. You have placed an order for 83, and you are proposing to order 97 more. So you're aiming for around 180 total. Just, I think, 10 days ago, I think there was a fresh order for around 12, if I'm not wrong, Sukhois being placed, I think, to again kind of meet the shortfall. But I think you pointed out very interestingly in our chats that these are Sukhois to kind of meet the
Replace the crash
ones, basically. So not really to fill the numbers. Then you have the Tejas Mark 2, like we discussed in a previous episode. We don't really know what's happening with that right now because the Mark 1A has not really seen the light of day in terms of deliveries. The MRFA, it's on paper. Again, we don't know the shape of what this contract will be to basically buy foreign fighter jets and buy some off the shelf and then kind of build the rest of them in India. The AMCA, the Advanced Multi-Combat Aircraft India's aim to develop its own 5th generation fighter. It's a proposal right now. It's an idea that's happening. It'll happen, like we've discussed on that episode as well. So this is what the Air Force is faced with, and to figure out basically what to do is this committee that's coming in. You would have thought that such a committee would have already been there. You would have thought that many such discussions would already have happened. So why are we doing this committee business all over again then?
I'm going to be very honest. This is a year-end episode, so I think our viewers or listeners, some of them at least, might have expected a kind of more buoyant, more cheerful kind of topic or tonality of this episode, and I'm sorry to disappoint at least some of them, but this is not going to be an episode where we're going to pull our punches, which Dave and I anyway never do. That's the reason why you guys watch us. But frankly, I'm a little alarmed by the formation of a committee. As a country, we love forming committees for every single thing. If there's a problem, the best way to kick a problem down the road is to say committee bana denge and let them deliberate on it. We've seen that largely in the political in the political sphere of our public life, but there is no shortage of that in the Ministry of Defense and in the military. And this we should say is a MOD committee that has been formed because it is under the chairmanship of the Defense Secretary. Now, as a very quick, polite sort of disclaimer, there is per se nothing wrong with the committee, because the committee at least brings in a degree of structure. It is basically saying that, okay, hold on, things are not quite on track and not quite the way they need to be in terms of the shortfalls of fighters, helicopters, refuelers, AWACS, drones, etc., etc. And it is significant enough a problem that we need to form a high-level committee just to bring all these many troubling strands together so we can make sense of it and generate some kind of action plan on how to deal with all of these separate problems. The reason why, so per se, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. At least you're recognizing. The fact that you're forming a committee means, A, you recognize there's a problem. B, you're willing to, put someone like as senior as the Defense Secretary in charge of sorting out that problem. And C, it shows that you have an action plan. You're doing something. It shows that you're not allowing these problems to simply drift. The reason why that disclaimer aside now, the reason why I feel a little alarmed is, don't we already know what the problems are? Why does this need a committee? Okay, I'm sure I'll get a lot of blowback from people in the MOD or the Air Force saying, you're a civilian, you don't have these pressures on your head. A committee has this benefit. It provides clarity. It gives you an action plan. It in black and white tells you what you can and cannot do. It generates a priority list. My answer to that again would be, sure, I'm a civilian and I certainly don't have those pressures. But as a taxpayer, I think it is yours and my, Dev, our right to ask, in the absence of this committee, are you honestly telling me that the Ministry of Defense and the Air Force did not have a handle on these priorities, were not aware of these shortfalls, did not have an action plan to foresee and address these shortfalls, did not have a structured way of addressing some of these critical shortages within the Air Force, which are, by the way, not new. None of these are, it's not like the Air Force or the MOD has woken up today and said, oh, we don't have 12 and a half squadrons, which we're supposed to have. Or, oh, wait a minute, it's been 15 years and we still haven't added new refuelers to our fleet. Or, oh my God, we're supposed to have 18 so-and-so aircraft, but we only have 3. It's not like that. It's happened for a very long time. So my sense of alarm and a degree of dismay is over this kind of feather touch approach, this kind of piecemeal approach that we see in Indian defense planning over and over and over again. And my fear is, and I'll go into this in greater depth as we progress through this episode, Dave, is that this particular committee is looking to sort of sort out just some immediate niggles right now. Do we wait for the Tejas? Do we accelerate the MRFA? Small, very kind of near-term quick fixes so that whoever's in office right now will say, I've done my little bit. Now the next guy will come and sort out the long-range, long-term issues. And that is one of the reasons why, and we've said this in so many episodes before, this is one of the reasons why that there has never been any kind of successful long-term procurement and modernization planning possible, especially in the Indian Air Force. Yep. Because of the number of committees, I'm simplifying it. It's not only obviously because of committees, but the fact that nobody has been able to bite the bullet in some ways and sort of draw a line and say, look, let's take a moment and create a kind of overarching 25-year plan as far as capital acquisitions and modernizations and upgrades for the Air Force are concerned, and then we'll talk about it. But since that hasn't happened, we are now on our year-end podcast episode talking about a damn committee that is going to discuss in a very intelligent way, because let's remember, we are right now, what we are doing is talking about the committee. The individuals who are members of the committee are all fine, highly qualified, extremely capable, responsible individuals. So let me also make that disclaimer. This is not about the defense secretary or the deputy chief or somebody else. The powers that be have decided that a committee of this kind needs to be formed, and they're the people who involved in this committee. My sense of concern and alarm is about the powers that be believing that a committee is even a step towards some kind of a solution. Seminars are held, events are held, all kinds of deliberations are happening on a constant level. As a civilian and a public citizen, my question is, where is the need for a committee when you already have these structures? You already have the MOD and the Air Force sorting these things out on a daily basis. Yep. When you suddenly signal that this requires an exclusive committee, the signal I'm getting is, shit, the problem is worse than I thought it was.
Yes, actually.
That's what I'm thinking. Because otherwise I'm thinking, wait a minute, there are communication channels between the MOD and the Air Force. Ultimately, it is the MOD that controls the purse strings. MOD knows what the shortfalls are. Air Force knows what the MOD can and cannot provide. Files are constantly moving between MOD and Air Force headquarters, which are literally about 800 meters apart. South Block and Vayu Bhavan are 800 meters apart. How difficult can it be for files to move between the two? There is no question of people not being, in the picture of what these are. So what is this committee? It's almost like I'm a little bewildered. Am I missing something? Because a special committee is formed when there is a, very, very urgent and immediate problem to solve. Like a JPC or a group of ministers, which the UPA government used to love. Any problem that came in, group of ministers, and by and large, Pranab would be the head of the group of ministers. He, of course, is no longer there. God bless his soul. But if he was still in the MOD, he would have probably been part of this committee also. So I'm just flummoxed that an Air Force and an administration as professional, as advanced, and forward-looking, something that should be so forward-looking as ours, has entrusted a committee to solve all these problems. I feel like sending them copies of all our episodes and saying, forget about the committee, just watch all these episodes. Usi se aapko PowerPoint presentation mil jayega ki kya karna chahiye. That's a little boastful, but you know where I'm coming from. So I think alarm and concern over another committee being formed is where I stand on this.
Yeah, right. You're right about us not wanting to sound boastful. It's not as though we have all the solutions in life for.
But we do have some.
But we do have some, exactly. But one interesting part of that report by Rajat Pandit, where he was quoting sources, was that this committee will look at the most critical capability void in the Air Force. That report also spoke about the rising Air Force threat from China. Then there's also this is not from the report, but this also happened, I think, maybe a week or so ago, or maybe a couple of days ago, I forgot the exact day, when there were some reports that Pakistan is looking to buy around 40 JF-35 jets from China. And there's some reports about the Bangladesh Air Force also kind of trying to expand, which could be a concern, especially considering what's happening in Bangladesh right now and our relations with that country right now, with Sheikh Hasina being deposed and kind of living in Delhi somewhere. You also then have the MiG-21, which is already old, not getting old, I'm sorry. And you want to phase it out, but you are not being able to because your Tejas Mark 1A deliveries have been hit because of the US supplier of engines being affected by a South Korean supplier of some part of that engine.
Supply chain mess, yeah.
Yes. So what is this void, and the alarm over the committee aside, how alarming is the situation for the Air Force really? Because it just seems to me that in this past 1 year, like said, we're ending this year. In this past 1 year, there have been just way too many reports just again and again and again highlighting and bringing it to our notice that, hey, there is an issue with the Air Force's fighter fleet.
I think, when history looks back on these last few years since 2020, I think the In Our Defense playlist on YouTube is going to be an amazing historical archive of all of the points that you've just mentioned. And I'm not even being facetious. I'm totally serious, because we've taken the bull by its horns on all of these issues that you've just mentioned. The fact that a committee sends out the message that we are once again reactive. We are reacting to our problems which have been festering over many, many years. None of the things that you mentioned, by the way, Dev, are a surprise to the Air Force. Let me say this without, I'm not trying to play both sides, because there are no sides here except national interest. The Indian Air Force is one of the most professional when it comes to looking at long-term issues. Okay, so the bottleneck here is not very often the Indian Air Force. The Indian Air Force has already war-gamed the possibility of the JF-35s going to Pakistan. Chinese fighters of any kind will ultimately fall into Pakistani hands. It's as simple as that. Now you've got the Bangladesh situation as well. You've got the entire dynamic of the India-China standoff that, we're making baby steps towards some kind of a normalization, but we're very, very far away from it. We've discussed that in a separate episode. But the fact that things have changed so much that we now need a kind of take stock committee signals once again a sense of urgency. But again, paradoxically, I'm wondering whether that signals that these issues were not urgent earlier.
Yep.
What has, again, none of these big changes have happened overnight, that they've gone from being traditional issues of modernization and comparative strength capitalization in other countries like China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, vis-a-vis what we are doing here in India. These things have been going on for years. The J-35 didn't spring out of thin air in China suddenly one day, alarming all of us Indians, saying, "Oh my God, we don't have anything." These things have been happening for a long time, and believe me when I say the MOD and the Air Force know these things very, very well. They are highly capable in terms of early warning, looking at long-term threats and planning for them. Which is why I'm confused and a little, left a little flummoxed about what this committee actually, seeks to achieve. The simple fact of the matter is, of course, there are shortages. Of course, there are shortages. The sanctioned squadron strength of fighters in the Indian Air Force is 42 and a half. We have somewhere around 30 squadrons right now, so we've got a huge shortfall, and this shortfall has been festering for the better part of a decade and a half, 2 decades now. It's not a current problem. It's been going on for a long time. So what does that tell you about the fact that for 2 decades you haven't been able to really address a situation that's been unfolding in front of your eyes? There have been 3 separate, I'm taking small examples, there have been 3 separate tenders and contests in order to give the Indian Air Force 6 more aerial refueling aircraft. Still has not happened. We've gone through all kinds of permutations and combinations. You chose the Airbus A330 refueling aircraft, the multi-role tanker. You've chosen it twice, but then you decided it's too expensive, so forget it. Then you're talking about leasing. Then you're talking about something else. Now again, you think you're going to have some other kind of contest, and so over 15 years you don't have a refueler. You're still dependent on your IL-78s. Okay, let's come to the AWACS. You had 3 AWACS from Israel, Russia, the Falcon AWACS built on the IL-76 platform that arrived in 2009, and I remember that clearly because I was covering the war in Sri Lanka when those aircraft arrived, and I was very upset because I wanted to be in Agra when the aircraft arrived, but I couldn't be because I was covering the LTTE war. By the way, when I was at the Andamans right now, the current SINCAN, which is the Commander-in-Chief of the Andaman and Nicobar Command, Air Marshal Sajju Balakrishnan, was the first commanding officer of the AWACS squadron when they arrived in 2009. And I was actually sort of commiserating with him and saying that, those 3 aircraft are still there. We're completely dependent on them. We've had all these extravagant plans in the last 15 years for more. We've added 3 more aircraft, based on the Embraer, the Netra, with an Indian radar. But beyond that, nothing has happened. We've had so many different things, A330 AWACS, some other AWACS, C295 AWACS, all kinds of different things have been thought of, but nothing has actually come in. And in a country of India's size, definitely needs more special aircraft of that kind. So that's your AWACS. Shortfall in AWACS. You've got a shortfall in your refuelers. Fighters we've already spoken about. Drones, completely separate story, but at least things are moving there because we're getting that drone deal is done, even though, as we said, that's completely delayed. Now you come to helicopters. Your light helicopter project has gone nowhere. The Indian Air Force has been in the market for, I think, something like 60 or 70 light helicopters to replace Cheetahs and Chetaks, etc. That has not gone anywhere. They've not been able to get those helicopters. Medium lift helicopters were supposed to come in much larger numbers. That hasn't happened. There's a shortfall there as well. So in any given category of air power in this country, there is a shortfall. Now, a shortfall by itself is not an alarming thing. Shortfalls happen. Everybody would like more aircraft. Everybody would like to meet that sanctioned strength. But the problem is, are you able to incrementally address it, in such a way that it becomes a sustainable kind of procurement process that people don't need to constantly worry about, okay, we have to have another contest. Okay, we need to do this. Okay, we need to do that. A great example is also the C-17 acquisition that India had. We ordered 10 aircraft. When the aircraft started arriving, the Indian Air Force and the Indian government realized how amazing these aircraft are. And a country of India's size and a country of India's responsibilities, especially in the Indian Ocean region, they realized that the C-17 is the only aircraft that can fly all around the world with huge, humanitarian loads. And be able to evacuate people from other places. And a country of India's size needs aircraft like this. So then India realized, shit, we've only ordered 10 of these aircraft, and the production line in Long Beach, California, is shutting, and they're only building a few more. So the US government said, look, we've got a few more aircraft, but you need to decide now because production is shutting now. This aircraft has been built for like decades, and now we don't have any more customers. These are the last few aircraft rolling off the line. So you need to quickly tell us. There were 5 aircraft, if I'm not mistaken, 5 aircraft which India could have said, yes, we want these aircraft because these aircraft are valuable to us. Delay. Finally, India was able to order 1 because the rest was scooped up by Qatar and some other countries because India didn't react fast enough. And it's a decision that is still being regretted because a country of India's size, most definitely for an aircraft of that kind, should have been able to operate at least 20 of those aircraft. And we're stuck with 11 now. So that's another small example of the system. And remember, that was not even the Air Force's fault. That was the government being sluggish in terms of decision making. So all of these shortfalls are not new issues. They're not surprises. They're not sudden code red alerts for the Air Force. They're well known for the Air Force. So it remains to be seen what this committee is going to do. I may be sounding a little too harsh and saying, I'm alarmed and flummoxed, but I will say this as a kind of other side comment, which is that I am interested in seeing what the action plan of this committee is going to be.
Yep.
What is it going to do? Is it going to provide a very, very sort of no-nonsense roadmap or a priority list in terms of what we're going to do? In my personal analysis, and I think Rajat has also mentioned it in his piece in Times of India, that the MRFA, which is the Indian Air Force's long adrift, hunt for 114 fighters, which will be a few of which will be bought off the shelf from wherever they are built, and the rest will be made in India under a localized production line. I imagine that is one of the immediate issues that needs to be sorted out because that's a huge money commitment.
Yes.
A huge, I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's over 1 lakh crore of public money that will be committed to that. So that's why this committee has been formed, perhaps to either decide whether that's going to happen or decide it's not going to happen. I imagine it is because the Indian Air Force has come too far and they see that as a quick fix. We've had a full episode on the MRFA and the sense in going through the motions all over again and hoping that sense will prevail. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But on all of these other aspects, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Is it going to be a white paper, one of those things that becomes another meandering PDF file on the internet, or is it going to be a kind of a sledgehammer report that says this is what we're going to do and this is how long we're going to take to achieve it? I hope it's the latter.
Yeah, right. We'll circle back to what this committee will kind of focus on. A couple of areas I really want to talk about actually. But just because we're on the topic of shortfall and also because I wanted to use this episode sort of to look at aspects of Indian Air Force's shortfalls that we've ignored. Not ignored as in, but that we haven't discussed on this podcast. The non-fighter fleet, like you mentioned right now. There was another report. It's a bad week for the Air Force, I think. There's another report that was tabled in Parliament by the government's auditor. Who said that even the pilots are running in shortfall. So apparently in 2015, you were short of pilots by 486. That number has gone up to 596.
Right.
So just as a tangent, what's up with that?
So again, this is not a new problem. The pilot shortfall in the Air Force has been a problem that I have personally seen in Parliament answers and reported on through my entire 20-year career as a defense correspondent. There are issues. First of all, we have to remember that there are all kinds of pilots in the Air Force. There are pilots for transport aircraft, for helicopters, for other kinds of. There are drone operators. There are heavy transporters, light transporters, attack helicopters, and there are fighter and bomber aircraft like the Jaguar, etc. There have been issues in terms of how many people are actually signing up. That's at the very basic level. There there is a problem with the number of people actually intending to join the fighter stream, which is an ongoing battle for the Air Force, which it has tried to do. We tend to think of fighter piloting as the obvious career of choice if you want to be in the Air Force. The glamorized world of fighter flying and the fighter cockpit means that anyone lining up to join the Air Force wants to be a fighter pilot, and now it's open to even women. So, how can there be a shortfall? Well, that's the ironic reality of it. Not that this is of any comfort, but pilot shortfalls are something that dog nearly every Air Force in the world, including the Chinese, including the US, including the Royal Air Force, including the French, everywhere. There is a pilot shortfall in virtually every Air Force in the world. There is a problem. There are societal issues as well. People are, there are other different kinds of jobs available to people. There is a sense now that, why should I get into fighter flying when I can do other things in the Air Force? There are so many other things that are available as well. But this is an ongoing battle that can only be, I think, addressed in a kind of multilateral way. There's no one quick fix solution. It's not like if you suddenly have a fabulous advertising campaign for joining the Air Force or recruitment, it's going to solve the day. It's dheere dheere ho jayega. It's like a that kind of thing. But remember that there are shortages in other pilot streams as well, not just in fighter aircraft. There is, albeit a smaller shortfall, in helicopter pilots and transport aircraft as well, and this needs to be definitely sorted out. Obviously, this committee is not going to look into that because it's more of a human resources issue than anything else. But also remember that not everyone. The other problem is you've got not enough people signing up to be fighter pilots. B, not everyone who signs up to be a fighter pilot is making it.
Yes.
Because there is a bounce rate there as well. Because it's not like, you want to be a fighter pilot, chalo. There are very, very robust, demanding, challenging and difficult hurdles to cross before you join the fighter stream, in terms of both online and offline sort of training that takes place. So it's not easy to become a fighter pilot. You have to walk over the coals, proverbially, to actually even make it there. So that's another kind of barrier to entry into the fighter stream, because obviously you need people of a 360-degree greater caliber to fly in fighters, because the demands of a fighter aircraft vis-a-vis any other aircraft are literally much more. So there is that bounce rate as well. So if you put all of these together, there is a shortfall. Yeah. Now the good thing is, no Air Force in the world is going to lower that barrier or kind of dilute the requirements, because you can't screw around with fighter pilots. You cannot. Those are your frontline men and women. You can't say, okay, we will go easy on some requirements. They don't need to know about this, or some physical characteristics or abilities, or sight, etc. You cannot mess with those aeromedical issues when it comes to fighter pilots, and I think that's the right way to go. It needs to be much more of a kind of recruitment issue. Yes. You need to entice people more to come in and fly fighters.
Right. Right. We'll go back to the committee now and look at couple of areas that it should or maybe it will focus on, but after a quick break.
If you see what has happened in South Korea, their judicial system, their opposition, their civil society, they have really protected democracy with all their might. Around the same time last year, if I remember, there were 146 MPs who were suspended from parliament. So how do you see this parallel? Do you think there's a reason to say that our people take democracy, for granted?
I think that there are two very different setups, firstly.
Okay.
There are checks and balances in South Korea. We are a different kind of a setup. They are very different. If you look at their system, where a martial law that has been imposed, like if the same were over here in India, maybe there would have been protests in a certain period of time, or maybe not. We don't know.
Yeah.
South Korea also has changed drastically. It has moved forward, although it's always been a democracy. how we withhold our democratic values is what it all comes down to, right? Over there is no impingement and no way of suffocating people through power. Might happen, but I'm just saying that if you're aware of your rights, you know that you have recourse. Over here, we're a democracy. These things don't happen here. But we've had our own set of emergency imposed. What is a national emergency? If not martial law, which is what they're calling it there. What's a national emergency here? We've had an emergency imposed in India as well. It does the very same things that the martial law in South Korea does. There might not be a military takeover, but it still is one where you lose all rights, including freedom of press, speech, expression, in many ways than one. And so while we are very dissimilar in our forms of democracy, we are still similar in a way that if the people stand up to the powers that be, they can shake the system.
Yeah.
They have done it in the past.
Right.
They've done it in the near past as well. And they will continue to do it in future as well. Because look at the checks and balances. The moment this happened, there was a massive revolt.
Yeah.
It was nipped in the bud.
Yeah.
And in fact, if anything, the one who imposed the martial law is the one right now who is being tried. I don't know if that would be the case or would have been the case with us.
Welcome back. Shiv and I are talking about what's ailing the Indian Air Force when it comes to resources in terms of fighter jets, non-fighter jets, stuff like that. And a committee that's been formed by the Ministry of Defense to kind of look at all these issues and to kind of figure out sort of like Shiv says, hopefully a roadmap for what could be done ahead. We've spent the first half talking about what's actually. First of all, obviously, Shiv describing his thoughts on what this setting of a committee means to him, which he says is quite alarming, not for the right reasons, and why this committee was formed, kind of giving our viewers and listeners a recap of kind of all the shortages that the Indian Air Force is facing. I was wondering, Shiv, if you think the committee will or perhaps should look at lessons that you could have or you should learn from the Tejas development cycle, because we've spent an episode talking about how it was overall a very good project. You know, the Air Force was not very happy with the fighter jet at the beginning. The one that you have in service is not really the one that Air Force wanted. The one that you're going to get is still not the one that the Air Force wanted. The one that the Air Force wanted, the Mark II, we don't know quite where it's there. And also the fact that you don't have your own engine to power these fighter jets, something that we've briefly touched upon on several episodes, noting how that's a very crucial issue in this whole shortage business. Because if you had your own engine, you could then perhaps develop, which you already have. You have developed an airframe around it. You just need to have that engine to kind of get that production line going. While I was researching, I just on a separate note, I think you'll want to definitely bring it up when you're answering this. I came across a Financial Times report, not very old, of just a couple of 2-3 months ago, where it says India is kind of exploring building its own engine with foreign help. I was like, wow, Shiv is gonna love this, love to talk about this. You know, I mean, great. You want to डेवलप योर ओन इंजन बट नहीं उसमें भी चलिए काम करते फॉरन हेल्प ले ही लेते बिकॉज हमसे तो पूरा नहीं हो पाएगा सो अगेन यू विल हैव टू सप्लाई चेन इश्यूज क्लॉगिंग दैट अप परहैप्स वन डे Anyway, my larger point, this, and do you think that the committee is going to look at the Tejas Mark 1A and see the Tejas development cycle and see if there are lessons from that there you can take and perhaps help solve the Air Force's issues?
So I don't think that the committee is going to look at the Tejas program itself. But I think that the committee has been formed because of the delays in the Tejas, in one way at least. There's a compelling factor here. So I don't think it has been formed to solve any of the Tejas' problems. That thankfully is something that the Air Force and HAL and other agencies are sorting out at their level. And like you rightly pointed out, the problems with the Tejas are not really an Indian problem. They are with the supply chain issues with South Korea and the United States, and our dependence on an engine of American origin has meant that we've got no choice but to sit around and wait for that engine to arrive. And I think Rahul Singh has done a piece this morning or yesterday where he says that the first deliveries of the Mark 1A are not going to happen before March 2025. So far from the 16 aircraft that were supposed to be delivered in the fiscal, there will be just a handful, 2 or 3 or 4 aircraft that will come. So that's a very, very significant sort of jolt to the Tejas program in terms of timelines and supply. The only comfort in all of this, if I can even call it comfort, because there is nothing comforting about it, is that it's not because of an Indian issue. It's not HAL's fault that we are going to get the Tejas Mark 1A late. It's because of the General Electric and their delays, etc. Of course, we can argue that project mismanagement, long-term lack of capability in terms of building an engine can all compounded in this terrible situation we are now in. But that's something we have spoken about on our engine episode. So we can put that in our show notes. But the truth of the matter is that the delay in the Tejas is, first of all, not a minor issue. The Indian Air Force, given its shortfall in terms of fighters, every little delay has a much larger effect than in an Air Force which had adequate numbers. It is a troubling issue because the Air Force is now very, very dependent on the Tejas coming on time, and has had to kind of recalibrate and look at different things, including the MRFA, I imagine. Probably accelerating the MRFA program in order to kind of alleviate the numbers pressure that will come on the Air Force as a result of delays in the Tejas fighters coming online. That is definitely one aspect of it. On your second part about an Indian engine being built, if any news about an Indian effort to build an engine is something that I will applaud and welcome with open arms. Whether it is with foreign help or not, we have to be a little realistic ultimately about it. We've done a full episode on the Kaveri engine program in India that didn't quite end up delivering an engine that was usable for an Indian fighter aircraft. And I think the Indian DRDO and the agencies involved we have to credit them with having been a little realistic about it, saying, okay, we are not able to build this engine ourselves, but let's leverage the huge contracts that we have with foreign suppliers, like the French or the United States or whoever it is. Let's leverage those relationships in order to accelerate building what is essentially our engine, but with some technological assistance from these behemoths of engine manufacture like GE or Snecma or Safran or whoever it is. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, because ultimately, as one of the world, if not the largest importer of weapons, what is the point of these relationships we have with these countries if we're not able to, rent some technology to build our own stuff? So I see nothing wrong with that. I think it's unrealistic to think of India now sort of ab initio building its own engine, developing its own engine, when it has already, quote unquote, failed to deliver a workable operational engine in the Kaveri program. So if India is now deciding to build its own turbofan jet engine with some tech from abroad, I say put your hands together and welcome it. My only concern would be enforce timelines, ensure that there is a workable plan going forward. I'm sure the people involved already know all of this. They would probably, look at what I'm saying as impudent, giving them advice on this. But we have a track record of having completely failed to deliver this. So therefore, I think I have the right to, mention these things. And we have to remember that the agencies involved, have in the past have a track record of competing interests, overlapping ego issues, turf battles, if not open hostility and animosity with each other, including HAL and the Indian Air Force. And therefore, leaving all that behind, if there can be a real shot at getting our own engine with some foreign tech, I think it's something that is definitely welcome. I don't think that is in the ambit of this current committee, because this is a committee of a more kind of acquisite, in the nature of shortfalls and acquisition and not technology. But it's very much on the table.
Right. So just to as we end this episode, a couple of points on just to kind of expand on what you just said, and you briefly touched upon at the beginning, your worry in terms of what this committee will end up actually doing. Do you think it's going to focus, like you said, on these piecemeal approaches of, how do we just immediately fix, not immediately fix, but give us sort of an immediate solution to and give some Air Force some fighters so that some squadron strength is fulfilled? Or do you think it's going to take a holistic look and try to identify the cause that because of which you are facing these issues? For example, is it that it is just way too expensive? Because fighter jets are damn expensive. I think one jet, any fighter jet would cost somewhere in upwards of rupees 500 crore. That's bare minimum is what I'm saying. And also the fact that, if you commit to something, if you commit to a big order of fighter jets, you are committing future governments to it, because a lot of people don't understand this. It's not a one-time payment, right? Every year the Air Force gets allocated a budget that's known as the CapEx budget, the capital expenditure budget. And this budget is not to buy new things. It's mostly to actually pay for the things you already bought many years ago. So if you're spending, if you're committing to, like you said, rupees 1 lakh crore ka order, that'll be like, generate a future many governments, they'll have to adhere to it, and that's a lot of money down the line in the future. Or do you think the problem also lies with the Air Force? While I was kind of researching, I came across this comment from former Defense Minister Manohar Parrikar. I think he was speaking at India Day Conclave in 2015, where he kind of basically said the military has aspirations the ones you see in comic books when it comes to the kind of quality they want from vendors, and he called it absurd and fanciful. I think these are words that he used. So do you think the committee will go into all of this and identify that one cause, and then perhaps give you this long-term roadmap, if you stay on this line, आगे जाके भी कभी तुमको issue नहीं आएगा?
So my experience with committees, and believe me, I've covered a lot of committees in my 20 years, Dev. My analysis of this committee is that it is what I call a crossroads committee. Or you could call it a fork in the road committee, which is that a committee has been formed because the Air Force now faces a difficult decision where it needs to prioritize one path over the other. And therefore, a committee has been formed to look at what is feasible, what is the better path to take. Do we speed up the MRFA? Do we put that on hold? Do we move ahead with other programs? Do we have the budget to do a couple of other things? I think any good committee at the very basic level, like I said in my first answer, generates a priority list. One page, here's your priority list on what to do, and here's how we're going to achieve them in a phased manner. The clearer and more specific the action plan, the better the entire point of the committee. I don't think that this committee, Dev, is going to look at long-term solutions to these shortfalls. And it would be unfair to expect that one little committee is going to be able to do that. Those kinds of solutions come from much larger studies and interfacing. That happens at a kind of daily level already between the Air Force, the MOD and other agencies, which is why I was wondering why a committee has been formed. So, when a committee has been formed, I think it's much more about some kind of an immediate crossroads or a fork in the road where a decision needs to be taken. And so we shouldn't expect anything greater than that. It's almost like, there's a bottleneck has been reached in terms of capital acquisitions or in terms of the challenges that the Air Force is facing. And therefore, the government has decided, let's form a committee to decide what the next step needs to be so we can get past this kind of bottleneck that is slowing us down in terms of bringing in fighter numbers or helicopter numbers or whatever it is. So despite all the harsh things I said about being alarmed that a committee is formed, there are some good things. There is a silver lining to a committee because, like I said in the beginning, in my disclaimer, I said a committee at least means that you are cognizant of the issue. You are awake to the fact that you need to make a decision. And we live in a country where decisiveness has never been a virtue in government.
Yep.
Timely decisions, clarity of decision making, the bureaucracy has been allergic to it, especially in the Ministry of Defence. So my only hope from this committee is that it provides a kind of very little elbow room to move this way or that way, or to be set adrift once again, because every committee once again is an opportunity to kind of kick butt and get things out of chairs and move and get things rolling. And believe me, and this is not specific to the Ministry of Defence, it comes as second nature to the bureaucracy, is that when the spotlight is gone, when the committee is wound up, things just roll back to normal. And then we're faced with the same old questions once again. And then a new situation will arise, if not in the Himalayas, then in the Indian Ocean. And then we'll be wondering again, why don't we have the same number of warships that China has? Or why aren't we ready for this kind of situation and stuff? So that kind of bleak picture should never face us. The good news to end this episode is the forces, the MOD, are not caught by surprise by these things. They know these things. They are fully prepared and ready with solutions for all these things. But sometimes it takes a little bit of a kick to get things moving again. And I think that's where this committee is coming into it. And like I said in my first answer, it's like there are very many issues happening at the same time. And I think someone is just trying to say, let's just quickly make sense of this in a kind of consolidated way. I mean, think of it as a fighter pilot who's getting like 100 different inputs from his sensors. There's a surface-to-air missile coming. There's a drone coming at him. Somebody's fired a missile from somewhere else. There's anti-aircraft fire coming in, and he's got this one screen in front of him that's fusing all that data and giving him an action plan of which threat to deal with first. And I think that's what this committee is about.
Yeah. Right. I think perhaps but there will be something good that comes out of this committee, and like you said, I think it's also a matter of figuring out which solution to choose. You already have solutions, like you said. The guys in the Ministry of Defence, the guys in the Air Force, they know what's to be done. But it's maybe a matter of saying, okay, let's do that and not that. Right. A fun note to, not really a question, just a note, because it just came to my head to end this episode and kind of, go back to what you said there at the beginning and your worries. I couldn't help but, think of the Kargil Review Committee when I was doing my research for this report, because it did exactly what you've described in the first answer. That committee's report was examined by a group of ministers panel, which set up several task forces. Then there was a parliamentary standing committee that reviewed that group of ministers' recommendations and to see what had happened. And then there was some other task force called the Naresh Chandra Task Force, which basically said nothing of that was recommended had happened in real life. And I think there was also a Shekhar committee a bit later, but kind of linked to the issue, but not really about the Kargil Review Committee report. But still, I think I just could not help think of that.
And just one example from all of these. By the way, all of these committees were very fine committees headed by highly capable people who gave really good actionable reports at the end of it. It's about implementation. It's about carrying out what they recommended where the problem actually happens, because committees by themselves do very, very good work, and India is very well prepared with good bureaucrats, good officers to do that kind of thing, identifying problems, recommending solutions. Since you mentioned the Kargil Review Committee report, I became a defense correspondent in the wake of Kargil, like 2004, 5 years after Kargil. And I remember that one of its recommendations was, of course, the Chief of Defence Staff, that India would benefit from having a Chief of Defence Staff providing overall leadership, etc. Every time that question came up in Parliament, the standard answer from whoever was the defence minister at that time would be that this is a big decision and consultations are taking place with all parties, and consensus is being evolved before a decision like this is being taken. Now, I don't know if that consensus had come when the Modi government finally decided, stop this bullshit. We are going to have a Chief of Defence Staff. Yeah. My sense is there was no consensus there. Okay, someone it took someone like a Modi, who happened to be in office at that time, to say that, listen, why hasn't this big decision, reform recommended by the K. Subramaniam committee been implemented? You've implemented so many other things. Why not this? And he took the opportunity to say, listen, I'm going to do it. He used his political capital to say, I don't care about what anybody else is saying. I'm going to do it. Yep. Why hasn't it happened for 20 years? And so he went ahead and did it. So I think it also takes a little bit of political authority.
Yes.
And it's not just about Modi. It could be any prime minister. It could have been the UPA post 2009 when it had bigger numbers as well to do something like this. It requires a little bit of a disruptive mindset as well to push through big reforms, which can be risky at the end of the day. So I think that's also something that will play a part in it.
Yeah, definitely. Right, let's end this episode on that note then. Thanks, Shiv. Great chat as always, and I hope we've given an overview of the larger picture view actually of many things that we've discussed on this podcast over several episodes. So thanks, Shiv. Thanks to our producer Anna Priyadarshini. Thanks to our viewers and listeners. This is the last episode of the year, so I'll do the cliched thing that I do with all my colleagues on 31st when I'm leaving office, is that I'll see you next year. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next year. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with your passport. Bye-bye.